You're listening to the Name Drop podcast, where we reveal the industry experts and brilliant founders behind the marketing campaigns and brands you know and love. In a world where things change fast and marketing is the opposite of static, we are here to reveal the marketing geniuses and how they find their inspiration, hoping to inspire you along the way. Hey guys, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Name Drop podcast today. We are joined by a really interesting guest who is going to be chatting with us about all of the opportunities that he sees within the D2C landscape and the pros of starting a consumer brand, which is not usually a take that we hear in this environment today, where there's just a lot of doom and gloom as it relates to starting a CPG brand and one that's D2C focused as well. So excited to share this conversation with you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. Before we started rolling, I was mentioning I'm in the middle of a fast, so you're getting like pure, unadulterated Elliot today.
A fast. When did you start getting hungry?
Immediately. I'm a big food-oriented person, so basically immediately. I was like, I want a slice of pizza. I want all of it.
Yeah. And you were saying if this is a 48-hour fast.
48 hours. This is day 2.
That's a long time.
Clarity is there, energy is there, but the joy in my life is just having a good meal.
Yeah,
know?
I can relate to that. I've never fasted for more than probably 12 hours, maybe 24, but 48 is like next level.
Yeah, it's next level.
Yeah, so you're feeling hungry today.
Feeling hungry, literally, also metaphorically, trying to get a bunch of stuff done. I feel like I'm fighting for my energy, but this has been like the most exciting thing on my agenda. So
awesome. Well, we're happy to have you here. So without revealing yourself, tell me a little bit about what you're working through professionally right now.
Like challenges?
Challenges, exciting things. What's top of mind?
I think focus and prioritization. So I'm at a startup currently. We'll get into that later after the reveal. But I think at a startup, when you're a lean and mean team, so many things are exciting. I don't really see it as operating in a place of like deficit. Like there's just an endless amount of things to do, and that is a good thing for me. I would much rather be in a place that has a lot of things that need to be improved or built out than somewhere where everything's already been done and you're kind of fighting at the margin. But focus and priority are kind of, it's almost cliche to say, but like it's super easy to say that that's what success is based off of, but the behaviors required to actually sit down and do that type of work, really, really hard.
Yeah. So tell me what types of things you're working through professionally right now. What challenges or exciting things are top of mind?
So without getting into the big reveal, I'm working at a startup currently, and I think a common issue for all startups is focus and priority. There's just so many things to build out and do, which I love. I get a lot of energy from that. I would much rather be at a company that has a huge to-do list than one that is like kind of at the end of its life stages and everything's already been done. But it's easy, like there's, shiny object syndrome. It's very easy to like want to go down the rabbit hole and explore certain projects. But if you step back and look at everything and be like, what really gives us leverage, or what's really going to push the needle for us? And the thing about focus and prioritization is the kind of like cliche examples of things that are very easy to communicate and understand and intellectualize, but the behaviors to put them into practice are incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going through currently, I think, is like looking at that huge never-ending to-do list of things that excite me, and then making a short list of the 5 things that are most important, and then giving all of my focus on those. So
do you do that on like a weekly basis, a monthly basis? Like how often do you revisit the things that you need to prioritize?
That's a good question. I think like you need a couple of rituals. Like I think you need like a weekly one. I mean, daily and hourly it creeps in as well, right? So it's like before I start my day, I'll like wake up and have my coffee and look at like what's going on with the business and be like, these things like have to get done. But it's easy to fall into a trap of thinking that everything has to get done. And this is simply not true. It's kind of like my phone. I feel like every app has become a glorified like inbox, right? Yeah. And I have all these notifications, and it feels like everything's been built to look like it's a fire that has to be put out immediately. And it's a helpful exercise to kind of just like see which things actually turn into a fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Definitely.
I realized in my life, like previously when I've been most stressed in a work setting, like I gave everything that weight. And it was like a boogeyman was around the corner. Like if I didn't do it, everything would blow up in my face.
Right.
But then I found like very rarely is something on fire, truly on fire.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I think I do this where I'll look at I do my weekly priorities, but then I also look daily, and then I'll take a step back and look at monthly or quarterly. And there's always those couple things that seem to continue to stay at the bottom of the list. And you're like, am I avoiding doing these things, or are they just not that important? And maybe they just need to be cut from the priorities too. I think, to your point, not everything needs to get done. Sometimes things stay on the list and don't get accomplished because they shouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah. Am I avoiding it because it's not high priority or because it's painful?
Right. Yeah. I always love hearing about, though, how people think through, especially when they're at a startup or a quickly growing company, what to prioritize and when, and these rituals around rechecking that list all the time.
Yeah.
I think it has to be done that way. Otherwise, you could end up going really far down a path that isn't successful, and we don't have time for that when we're in this mode.
Yeah. And I feel like busy work is something that we all do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm going to unpack like a philosophy I've been working with lately, but I think like we all have defaults, like a phone, right? And the defaults in your apps and phones, like they're not really built for you. They're built to serve other people. And I think about a lot of defaults in how we approach work as well. And busy work is a good example. Like you think that you're crossing things off, and it's like, it's not really contributing to pushing things forward. And depending like where your like work history has been, like sometimes if you're in a really big organization, like you can hide behind busy work and give off the illusion of productivity. But at startups, you're not really given that privilege because like everything's visible.
Right. There's nowhere to hide.
There's nowhere to hide. There's no like layers of the hierarchy or like org chart where you can just kind of hide behind. And like that's really hard. And I think like something I'm trying to get better with is like, it can feel like braggadocious, but like when you do things, you got to kind of like communicate that you're getting them done. And like all the successes, big, small, medium sized, whatever, you kind of have to like broadcast that and toot your horn, because other people are so focused on what they're doing. They're not going to just like break out of what they're doing to go observe that. And it goes both ways. Like I would love to know when I'm working with people, like when they have a win, communicate to me, because I don't want to be in the dark about that.
Right. Yeah, I could not agree more with that. We have that discussion with our team of like, you have to communicate back when something big has been accomplished, or let's celebrate it, because if we don't know, then we can't build upon that. But I agree with you. I think it's hard sometimes because people don't want to seem like they're bragging, or they're down on working head down on their things, and it's not. They don't want to take the time to come back and communicate it. So it definitely happens.
Sure. I think there's like two things on that like really interest me. Like I had a boss once who basically told me about repeating yourself being super important. And I think there's like two ways that like comes into practice. Like one, if you're trying to like communicate a strategy, you can't like throw a meeting and communicate that strategy once and put it in a deck and think that everyone else has vision.
100%, right? Yeah.
You have to like literally get tired of your own voice repeating that over and over and over again. With it has to happen daily at meetings. And I would notice it like when there was big organizational changes at places I worked where like the strategy was shifting, like it was a daily thing. Like they were slapping it in your face as often as possible so that you can get it into you. And the other example obviously is the win stuff. Like you just kind of have to keep harping on it and advocate for your team and like the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Repetition. Yeah. Like working out. You got to just keep doing it.
Yeah.
So speaking of bragging, brag about yourself a little bit. What are you most proud of as you look back at your career or your current role? What are you great at?
That's a good question. So I've worked at, consulted for, advised, ran projects for Fortune 550, 500, 5,000 brands. So the whole gamut from like publicly traded top 5 all the way through to like startup that just opened doors. I always talk about my growth marketing career is like it's been like a decade. And I think it breaks into like 2 distinct eras. So the first era was like what I call like selling bits and pixels. So like I grew up internationally. I got really interested in like the startup and internet economy when I was in like high school and starting off in college. And the only way I could do that is if I was like working from my laptop, right? So like digital-based business models like made sense. I was learning on my computer. I could reach out and work for people over the internet. I was like doing remote work like long before the pandemic because of that. So I worked with like every type of digital-based business model. So marketplaces, B2B software, some consumer tech, edu-tech. Basically, like if you can sell it over the internet, that's where like I cut my teeth. And it started off like mostly with like, I don't know, like marketing before it was like, I think digital marketing has like eaten marketing up. I don't really make that distinction.
I agree.
But it started off like, you know, with marketing internships. And then like when growth really became like its own department and like as that was being defined for organizations, I thought it was like a really good thing to go headlong into. And my thesis was so simple is I was like, every company is going to want to grow. So like if I go deep in this, I feel like I have like job security. I'm not knocking on wood because like we're living in the age of AI. So
who knows?
At the time, it felt like it was a very secure thing for the future. And like that's the first era. The whole time I was doing that, I was wildly work jealous of what I was like kind of referring to as the builder class. So in growth, you work hand in hand with, you know, cross-functional teams. And I was talking to people who code, people who design, and I thought that they just had so much leverage. Like they were building the things, and in growth, you like dip your toes. Mm-hmm. Like you can design like an ugly ad or an email campaign, or you can like build a landing page, but you're not an engineer. You're not a designer. You just kind of like learn the language and how to use it to get your work done. And I like looked back in my life, and I think for as long as I've been around, I've been jealous of builders. I just never considered myself one. So I don't know, this is like a random example, but like,
no, keep going.
When I would like come back to the States for the summers and like visit, I remember going to like a supermarket and being like so mind blown by the drink aisle and like the sauce aisle. And I was like, there's so many brands here. And I would pick them up, and in my brain, like a little game I would play, like, who did this? Because I feel like the Coca-Colas of the world and these really big companies, you don't really think of them anymore as like people are doing this. They're just like it's an
mass conglomerates.
Yeah, it's like it's a building. It's not an individual. But I would pick up like a hot sauce, and be like, who woke up one day, quit their job, and was like, I'm gonna make my own hot sauce. Yeah. So the second era was working in physical goods. So I helped, tons of beauty and wellness brands, better for you snacks, beverages, all of that stuff. And that really kind of made me fall in love with the e-commerce world. So I guess for the last like 5-6 years, I've been really deep helping e-commerce brands with everything from, branding, positioning, getting set up, e-commerce, the whole 9 yards. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Amazing. Where did you live abroad?
I was in Russia until I was 18. I went to, I studied business and law in Spain for like 5 years, bopped around. Like my parents were in London for a while. I was in Berlin. And then I finally moved back to the States when I was like 23.
Okay.
And it was mostly because I like ran out of visas. Like for the first time in my life, like I legally had to come back to the States.
Wow.
And I thought it was going to be a pit stop, but I've been here ever since. And I think like New York is like really like where I belong right now.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a cool way to grow up in all those different locations.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
I think it does like help me a lot professionally. Yeah, and like in hindsight, of course, it made me like a more rounded person. But like, I don't think like when I was going through it, I was like, no one's like kind of observing their experience and being like, I'm going to use this professionally when I'm older.
Right. Like that now this is part of my toolkit.
Yeah, no. Yeah. But like in hindsight, all of it, like going to Russian public school or living in a bunch of different countries and seeing how like, I can't imagine having as good an understanding of like CPG and consumer if I hadn't lived multiple places.
Right. Oh, I bet. Yeah, because it gives you a totally different perspective. I mean, even your point before on U.S. grocery stores. Yeah. The experience in a U.S. grocery store cannot be found anywhere else in the world. No. It is so unique.
It was mind-blowing because like that same situation, like going through the drink aisle, there was like Coke, Diet Coke, Fanta, Sprite, an iced tea maybe. Right. That was it.
That's it. Yeah.
Now you always see like the memes of like Erewhon or something, and you see that there's like thousands of brands, and the Coca-Cola corner is now like just 2 columns in the whole drink section.
Yeah.
So
different worlds. So let's talk a little bit about e-commerce and your take on the D2C landscape today. What do you think brands are struggling with?
So I'll take hopefully like a refreshing angle, because I feel like there's a lot of like doom and gloom, and I'm not saying this without struggle. So I'll take that as part 2 of the question. I think that part 1 is like, it's a really great time to be building a DTC brand or an e-commerce brand or a CPG brand. And I think there's a couple of reasons behind that. I think the first one is like the shift towards profitability is a good thing, right? I think it creates like a much healthier vanguard of brands. Like all the challenger brands are people standing up things now. I feel like I talk to them and I'm like, wow, this is like a completely different class of entrepreneurs than I saw like 5 or 10 years ago doing it. Not poo-pooing them.
Yeah.
Like they were taking advantage of the times and working with what they had. But like now I feel like a lot of people have like a really robust finance knowledge, where before it was kind of willy-nilly.
100%.
People are, thinking about profitability from every decision from day one. So like the headwinds are real, right? Like I think there's a lot of things that we don't know what consumer demand is going to be like in 10 months, 18 months, 24 months. I feel like a force majeure, like a pandemic could happen again. No one had that on their bingo card.
No.
And like VC money, like kind of drying up. Like, I think it's kind of true that like, even if I don't think we're going to return to that level of VC investment that we had in the last bull run.
Yeah.
I think even when money is plentiful, and if we go back to like a ZERP environment, I don't really think it's going to revert necessarily, because now we're seeing that a lot of those brands that were getting funded like shouldn't have been funded,
Yeah.
Like a grow at any cost and worry about profitability later might work for like software companies that are trying to land grab a huge market share, but I don't really know if it works for a consumer brand.
I don't think so.
So I guess to summarize, I think it's like a really interesting time because of competition being really high, because profitability is basically making people smarter about how they build their brands. And then from the SaaS point of view in e-commerce, like I feel like we're at like the most interesting time for technology in e-commerce, I think, that's ever existed.
Yeah.
If you want to go far quickly, the technology that can enable that is like plentiful. And that's really exciting, like just both from like selling that to brands and being like honest about the fact that we can provide a ton of value. But having been on like the big corporate side, like if you're starting out a brand right now, you can compete and do things faster than a legacy or like incumbent brand. They're big ships and they move slowly, and that's not to poo-poo them. I think there's like plenty of rational reasons that I've learned why like a publicly traded brand or something that's owned by a conglomerate that's like in the multiple billions of dollars per year, like they have rules in place and red tape and stuff like that for a reason. But if you're a small brand, like you can adopt technology and you can go very far with a team of 5.
Oh, agree. And quickly too.
Quickly.
Yeah. It's totally different.
So I don't want to come and like be like, oh, it's terrible.
No.
Demand is going to kill you. But like, I actually think it's a really, really good time to start a brand because of all of that.
I like this positive take. I think there is a lot of doom and gloom, especially as, media platforms, digital media platforms were some of the biggest drivers of D2C growth over the past 5+ years. And with media costs rising and it being such as a competitive landscape and harder to acquire customers, I feel like general sentiment around D2C is, oh, it's harder than ever. It's more expensive than ever. We can't generate these machines like we used to. However, I agree with you on 2 points, that there are other technology offerings today that are much more sophisticated than Meta ads. And 2, this move towards more sustainable business models, I think, is huge. And I'm so glad this shift is finally happening, because I couldn't see how these growth at all cost setups were going to work in the long run. Like at its core, businesses are about people, and that's not a people model, right?
No.
Like the founders and the employees of those businesses are never going to win.
No.
it's just not possible. That's not how the business model is set up. The business model is set up to have investors get their payout, period.
Yeah.
So especially for consumer brands, it felt just not realistic. So I'm glad that there's this focus coming back onto profitability and how to scale sustainably. I think it's super important.
Yeah, and I think like there is a positive side to a lot of people getting wiped out.
Yeah.
And I think the positive side is, if you look at software as an analogy, I know there's like a lot of differences, but bear with me. Like so many founders that had success in like the mid-aughts and 2010s, like were also involved in the internet bubble.
Right.
And they found what was wrong with the businesses they were building and try to like basically adapt to that and use new trends like mobile and social and stuff like that to like rebuild their brands, and they were better off for it. So I think if I know anything about people who work in e-commerce, is like the best ones are resilient.
Yeah.
So they'll bounce back. So if their brand went under before, they're likely going to get right back on the horse, either starting a new thing themselves and have all of these like positive learnings that they're going to bring to the table, or they're going to go join someone else and avoid the mistakes that they had when they went under.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm trying to bring like the sunshine instead of the doom and gloom.
I like it. So what relationship has been most impactful on you professionally?
I think I'm lucky in the sense that I've never had a boss I didn't like.
That is lucky.
And I'll go so far as to say I've only had incredible bosses. I don't even have to knock on wood, because I think there's like some element of like design to that. I lucked out probably earlier in my career because I wouldn't know how to pick a better one. But everything I've learned through those experiences, like I have a scorecard that I'm looking for if I'm going to a new job or something, and I want to work for someone who inspires me. And I feel like every boss I've had has imparted so much wisdom on me, and like genuinely changed how I look at things. So I'll give you like an anecdote. Is like when I was working in big corporate America, I'd come from the startup world, and even in interviews, I was like, I like to break stuff. I'm not really process oriented, like all this stuff. And they were like, it's great for the job that we're hiring you for. We're looking for someone who can kind of bring in that type of stuff. And I encountered so much stuff that like about corporate America that I was like, is this BS?
Yeah.
And I would kind of like try to fight it, or like, I don't know, the arrogance in me kind of felt like I could like improve it or change it. But I had a boss that was just kind of like, yeah, this is BS, but this is how the game is played.
Yeah.
And like your success is basically based on how well you get to play the game. And what I got out of working with big corporate America before going back to startups was like a lot of soft skills. I wouldn't say that like things move a little bit more at a glacial pace. So I wasn't using a lot of like my hard skills as much as I would in a startup, which is just like hands-on keyboard, hand-to-hand combat. But, you know, ability to negotiate with stakeholders and decision makers and raise funds and do like all these bigger things, like were things I previously would have just been like, can I just like type it up and get a yes, no answer?
Right.
And I'm so much better for it. I feel like going back to the startup world, I'm so thankful that I had a lot of those skills like knocked into me. And to go like back to your question, like I think that examples like that are just abound with leaders that I've had in all the roles I worked at.
That's amazing. Yeah, you do learn. I spent some time in big corporate, and the skill set that you build on how to sell something in to multiple stakeholders and what it means really to influence people. I also am like forever grateful for having those experiences, because that wasn't what I had to do previously. To your point, it's like show the idea, show the results, and then get buy-in from one person. And it's very different when you're at a giant organization. Yeah,
and some of it is like, like sometimes you learn how to window dress a little bit of what you're communicating. That's a big thing in corporate America. And I feel like at startups, they try to avoid that. But like, I don't know, sometimes you need to politic a little bit. Sometimes you need to find a way to present something to get what you personally want out of your career. And yeah, I feel like I've had really great mentors and bosses that have helped me with that.
So I have to ask, in the interview process, what do you look for in a boss? Like, do you have does it change when you go into a new role? You're sort of looking for something different to diversify your experience, or do you have like a checklist of a few things, or are you just looking to feel like a connection with that person when you're interviewing with them?
I feel like the connection is like the base layer, because if I'm not feeling that, like this is like goes back to like growing up in Russia. I think I had an epiphany a couple years ago that probably a therapist would have said dates all the way back to in like Russian public school or something. But like I found that I need someone to push me hard, and the epiphany was somewhat painful to go through, because I thought that I had a lot of like self-determination and drive and being able to do things like autonomously. And I realized that it's not that strong. And everywhere in my life where I found like a coach, like CrossFit is an example. Yeah. I used to work out a ton. I don't think I ever work out harder than if I have like a personal trainer, or like I'm going to a CrossFit class where someone's yelling at me. Yeah. And I've had the same thing with bosses. When I'm saying that I've had incredible bosses, it's not like all of them are like people that I want to hang out with 24/7. Yeah. I'm glad to have a boss now that like I really enjoy personally as well. But like I've had bosses that were like quite strict, kind of scary, but they got work out of me that was like so much better than if I was left to my own devices. Yeah. So that the connection thing, that's like the base level. I need that for sure, else it's like not going to go forward. But I like them to have this like X factor or like shape to them that I kind of want to get through osmosis. Okay. So like I kind of suss out talking to them, like, do they have this X factor thing? And like I try, for better or for worse, like I think I can do anything if I put my mind to it. I don't know. I always think that like there's more benefits than shortcomings to that. Yeah. So like I'll meet someone who I want to work for and be like, they have this thing or this trait or this ability that being around them a couple hours per, like you're hanging out with your boss and people you work with more than anyone else.
Than a lot of people. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any studies to back up that thing that you're the average of the 5 people you're around the most, but I immediately am like, I want to be under their wing. Mm-hmm. And if I get 40% of that ability, 20% of that ability, I'll be better for it and a more well-rounded person, more productive person. That's important to me. Yeah.
I think that's super thoughtful. I think a lot of times people just go and look for the next role and just think about the day-to-day and not as much about, I mean, maybe, okay, sure, this person seems like they would be fun to work with, but not, am I going to be really challenged by this person, or do they have something that I know I don't have and they can fill that gap for me or show me that how to get that quality or skill. Yeah. I think that that's really important and smart when you're looking at new opportunities, for sure. So tell us who you are. Who are you? What do you do? Let's hear the reveal.
I'm Elliot Roazen. I am a director of growth at Platter. Do I stop there?
Tell me about Platter. Cool. Tell us about Platter.
Awesome. So I'm going to go full circle here. Yeah. So like I used to be a brand operator, right? I was a customer of Platter's. So while I was on the brand side, I was like, it's pretty hard to build your Shopify store. Mm-hmm. So your options to date, and I've done them all, and I've had all the pains and scars to show for it. You can go and use like an off-the-shelf theme. But the joke I kind of give is like an off-the-shelf theme is kind of like buying clothes on AliExpress. It looks great in the images, and then you try it on for yourself, and doesn't. Yeah, it's all, oh boy, yeah, it's all warped and stuff like that. So that accrues a bunch of tech debt. You use this free theme, $200 theme or whatever, and you try to customize it to what you do, and you end up having to reach out and spend thousands of dollars and find someone to help you with it. The alternative is like you could go to an agency, which varies and comes in all different types of shapes and sizes and abilities. But those are expensive. So It's going to cost you, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that store built for you. And if I know anything about the profitability conversation we were talking about earlier, like you just don't have that at a DTC brand. No. And then I would say in the last 10 years specifically, this do it yourself thing has popped up where it's like you can just download a couple of apps and do it yourself, mm-hmm. which I find that most people who start brands are brand people or product people. which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they're storytellers or they really know the product, and that's great. That's not a diss at them, but they're not conversion rate optimization experts or e-com experts. No. And there are some, like, I know I've met plenty of people who are like, it feels like everything to do with e-commerce they can do. But that's rare. So what Platter is like an alternative to those, right? So it's a theme and app bundle that allows you to build a high performance Shopify store. So if you're a brand and you want to bring in a bunch of features and functionalities that help you with conversion rate optimization or average order value, or just like to build a very nice, well-performing experience for your customers, we're a solution that helps you with that.
Amazing. And do you work with mostly like net new brands? Do you help some brands re-platform? Like what is your typical...
All of the above. I would say the sweet spot are brands that are doing like above $5 million in annual revenue, but we work with all the way up to like, you know, large brands. And we worked with a lot of like brands that are starting out. Our two offerings currently are one is like a self-service app that we're launching in the coming days. So that is like, obviously since it's self-service, like whoever wants to throw it on their store and start playing around with it, they can. And the other modality that we work with is like a bundle. So that's more of like you reach out to us, we understand your store, we audit it, we come up with a bunch of different ways that we could rebuild it using our theme and app bundle. And then it's kind of a mixture between like a hyper efficient tech enabled agency and then a bunch of tech things to help you take it moving forward.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like it simplifies some of the barrier to entry, hopefully, for those who are either looking to scale or just getting started. I think I have a few clients in mind that would benefit greatly from this.
Yeah,
so
I mean, the introduction.
We'll have to talk.
Yeah.
So what is the high and the low of your current role? Like, what's the best and the worst part?
The high is definitely like working with like super smart, super competent, curious, hungry people. Like we're a lean and mean team. I think we're like 15 or so now. We're growing at a steady clip. And we have like huge ambitions and we're building like product very quickly and we're trying to market and do a lot of things that, you know, you'd be surprised at how small our team is, you know, but that keeps me up I wake up super pumped to work on stuff every single day.
Awesome.
And not that like, I've always worked, I feel like, with teams of like very interesting, smart people, but being back on the startup world after corporate, the speed thing, it's like, I feel like super talented, curious people plus the speed, that's where you kind of get trapped. And like, I don't really see myself going back to red tape and moving slowly and getting approvals and stuff like that. I think the worst part is my default that I'm trying to unhack, as we talked about earlier, is I'm very impatient of myself, of results, of projects I'm working on. And I think you should be short-term impatient and long-term patient.
Yes, I agree.
And once again, easier said than done. The behaviors required to put that into practice are brutal. So I guess what that means to me is like the vision that I want for Platter, for my career, for the things that I'm working on are not going to be actualized today, next week, probably not next month, and unlikely in this year. And having those big, bold, patient visions is what you need to build something that's significant and large. But week to week, like I have to be impatient about the steps to build that. And I have to keep those two things true in my head. And they're constantly at odds.
Yeah, I can relate to this so much. I'm also very impatient, and it was something I really struggled with, especially in the first few years of building Indie. I was just like not the best version of myself all the time because I just wanted things to happen faster. And my dad is an entrepreneur. Yeah, he still is an entrepreneur. And he was like, you have to let the game come to you a little bit.
Yeah.
Like if you're constantly chasing it at this unbelievable pace, you're forcing something that isn't going to be built in a day, like for what your ambitions are. And I try to keep that in mind and also relate it to like marathon training. It's like you have your training schedule and week by week, you have to go hard on your training schedule, but not try to rush it because you're building towards this bigger thing.
Yeah.
But it's easier said than done, especially
it's
for
so much easier said than done.
fast-paced, ambitious people who don't want to wait. So
yeah, and like it kind of ties back into the thing we were talking about earlier about focus and priority.
Yeah.
It's like to be short-term impatient means to kind of be in the weeds. And being in the weeds sometimes like prevents you from seeing the bigger picture.
Totally.
So you have all these beliefs that are true, but they are conflicting, and I have to juggle them all the time. So it's like, to be short-term impatient, like I have to scratch off all these tiny things every week. I don't know, that's kind of my side rant there, but like I think that to do well at a startup is to take a lot of those beliefs to heart and intellectualize them, but also understand how they are like utterly at odds with each other.
Totally.
And juggle all of those and make it happen.
Yeah, I agree. So at 21, did you ever think you would be in this job and in this role that you're in now?
Probably not. Yeah. It's funny. I think like I have a terrible vision for the future, like our ability to like predict the future.
I mean, it's hard to do.
Yeah. And I think some people like fancy themselves like very, very good at it.
Yeah.
I think in the 7 years, I'm 28 now, I'll be 29 in June. I think the world and my reality is so far from what I thought it would be when I was 21. And that's kind of like nice.
I agree. It makes it more fun, I think.
It makes it more fun. And like, I feel like the doom and gloom thing we were talking about earlier, a lot of this is based on what ifs happening. And like, I'm so convinced I have no idea what's going to happen in 2 years, 5 months, 10 years. Like I've completely given up on that.
Yeah.
I'm like,
good.
Yeah, I think like doing the right thing day to day, week by week. Have you read that, God, it's going to kill me, the Morgan Housel book that just came out, where it's like, I wish I knew the title. It's basically a book all around like the things that never change.
Okay. Interesting.
And
no, I haven't read it.
I would pick it up.
Yeah.
It's really good. And I think that like I, in my 28 years of wisdom, have kind of like given more credence to these things that never change versus like these like brand new things that are popping up in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's smart. I always hated especially when you would interview earlier in your career and people would ask, well, where do you want to be 5 years from now?
Yeah.
It's an impossible question to answer because you don't know what things are going to look like or opportunities are going to pop up. And I think you have to know, like have a North Star that maybe you're striving towards in a more general capacity, but you have to surrender to not really knowing what it's going to look like and follow the signs to some extent. So
yeah, and it's like that's not supposed to be scary.
Right. It should be exciting.
It should be exciting.
It should be exciting.
And it should be kind of like a relief.
Yes. I know, because if you knew all that was going to happen, how boring would that be?
Boring, somewhat miserable.
Yeah.
I feel like if things didn't go according to plan, you wouldn't see it as like a natural progression, but more as like, did my entire timeline flip?
Right.
I don't know.
I agree. So what's your biggest piece of advice for someone who is either looking to get started in the e-commerce world or is looking to move into the e-commerce world? Like, what would you say they need to think about, focus on? How would you advise?
I'm going to do two different groups of advice. One for like the brand side. So on the brand side, it's not a get rich quick scheme. I think there's like a lot of great examples of brands that had like an exit in a couple of years or, went from 0 to 8 figures at like what feels like in a matter of months or something like that. All of that's noise. I wouldn't even like pay attention to it. I don't really know how it benefits you. I'm not of the school of thought that like reading other success stories by entrepreneurs is like particularly valuable to you. But if you're starting a brand, you basically have to commit to 10, 20, 50, 100 years. Like that's brands that stand the test of time and really become viable businesses are old. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the brands that have gone public in the DTC era, like they're all in the dumpster. But consumer brands that are worth, billions or trillions of dollars, like they're old. They're decades in the making. Like Lululemon is old. We forget about that.
Yeah.
Just because everyone started really buying it in the internet era. Like that's like it's from the early 90s or late 80s or something. Like it's an old company. And you should be, I think it follows the same thing about patience. You should be short-term impatient about growing your business and growing something that's like great, but you should be playing a very long game. And that should be the fun part. Because if you're worrying about selling your company a couple of years in, there's very few companies that have like these like super successful exits in the consumer space.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think you're going to make a lot of great decisions if that's the way that you're approaching it.
Right.
The second thing for the brands is I think this is why I kind of left the operator side to go back to working in software, is like anyone I know that's been successful in consumer has like a certain degree of masochism. It is painful to run a consumer CPG brand, whatever. It is a lot of getting punched in the face, and you have to enjoy that kind of problem solving. And it's not that I'm saying that other forms of startups or verticals aren't without like stress and issues, but like if you wake up and you have a container that's stuck in the Suez Canal or something, or you had a misprint of a claim or something, and now you have a bunch of like sick consumers or something, like things happen to you in consumer that like I don't think a lot of people talk about.
Yeah. And
when I was in like high school, I remember like chefs were having like a new moment as being like rock stars. And I think like working in consumer is the like kind of like it's having the rock star moment where people want to leave finance, want to leave consulting, want to leave law, and like take a lot of their skills and build consumer brands because it's like sexy and there's some appeal to it. But it's painful.
So painful.
So painful.
Yeah. I have a friend who started an ice cream company probably 4 years ago now, and I hear her stories and I think about my journey with Indie, and I'm like, thank God I'm in the services business, because the types of challenges she faces are just so different and out of her control. I mean, there are certainly things that are out of my control too, but it's just a different, when you're dealing with the supply chain, it's a different world. Yeah. And different set of potential hurdles that you could hit. So I agree with you. It is, get ready for the punches in the face for sure. Yeah. And it's like, I don't think people realize that like you're not getting paid mid six figures to do these things. Like your P&L as a consumer brand is like, you're fighting to keep profitability, and it's like razor thin if you're not good at that. Yeah. I could go on that for ages. I think on the SaaS side, which I'm on now, is like build as much empathy you can for the operators because they're going through it. So like a lot of the problems that they have, like you don't want to look at it like cold and be like, oh, you're looking for more revenue through this. So we have like, think about the real things that are facing brand founders. Like they're juggling 100 different issues. They're not like ignoring a particular channel or something like that because they're like lazy or something, you know? Right. And I think coming back to SaaS after being on the operating side is my superpower now, is like I'm talking to brands and I realize exactly what they're going through. Yeah. You can relate to those struggles. Yeah. We talk about that even with our clients sometimes, of their job and day to day is so, we don't know half of it. We know less than half of it. So if we can figure out how to make any piece of it easier, then we're doing our job. Yeah. And keeping that in mind of just empathy first. Like their daily struggles look a lot different than ours do. Crazy. And it's like on the service side or software side, sometimes like these brands are like slow. And it's like, I don't think they're slow. They're on their 8th agency call by the time they're calling you that 100%. Day. Every one of those agencies called was terrible news. Terrible news. Compounded. One terrible news from one agency affects what you're doing with another one. Like it's just like, put yourself in their shoes, and I think all the money is to be made by people who are empathetic to those problems, at least in this space. I agree. Amazing. Well, let's wrap it up with a couple trendy or tragic. So let's do it. I'll give you a topic. You tell me what you think. Cool. Okay. Beyonce's entry into country music. Trendy or tragic? Trendy. Yeah?
Yeah.
You like the reinvent?
I think like it's a good way to get some more awards.
Yeah.
I can't imagine sticking to a single genre. Like, I don't even want to be in the same vertical. And she's had a much more successful and long career.
Yeah.
So good for her. That's awesome.
I agree. You have to give it to her. She's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Always trying something new.
That's cool.
I've been seeing a lot recently I feel like this pops up every, I don't know, year or so, of critique around Amazon's meeting style of writing the papers before the meeting, not having any PowerPoint presentations, like leaving a seat open in the room to represent the customer. What do you think? Trendy or tragic?
Some trendy, some tragic. So leaving the chair open in the corner as like that's kind of tragic to me. I think it's that's a bit corny.
Yep.
I'm not big on PowerPoints.
Okay.
Unless you're going to do them like a very strict way. Like if you're making a PowerPoint for me, it better be like one image, one title, a couple of words on it. If you're going to have a million things on your slides, like you're just kind of using this format to hide that you don't really know what you're talking about. The starting the meeting with a memo, big fan.
Okay.
And this goes back to why I don't like the PowerPoints either, is like if you can't really just explain it to me in writing that's clear and effective and persuasive, then you're using PowerPoints just so that you can throw a bunch of colors and fonts and clip art in there to try to make your argument. That doesn't work on me. I'm not going to believe more in what you want to do just because you put like a photo in it.
Very fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on the fence on the memo only because I think that there's so much time that goes into writing that and then everyone digesting it. But I understand the point, and maybe especially in such a large organization, like getting everyone literally on the same page when you kick off a conversation makes sense.
It takes a long time to make a deck.
Yeah,
like
it does.
I've suffered in one of the examples when I'm talking about big corporate world, is like you have to play the game. I'm not trying to like swim against the current and know I have to do it, but it would take like 7 people a couple weeks to put a deck together. Like you count our hourly wages and see how much work went into pushing pixels around versus just like finding a better way to edit written word. I don't know.
Fair. Okay, last one. I feel like this brand is very polarizing. People either are super into it or not at all. Liquid Death.
Love. I'm trying to find like what does it. I love bubbly water, so I'll pick up the unflavored bubbly water all the time in a can. I prefer cans over bottles for everything. I have like a Diet Coke addiction, and my fridge is like full of cans. It's just cool to take risks.
They're very good at taking risks.
Yeah, like
very good.
I feel like I hear a think piece like every week about like, oh, this campaign they did. It's like,
oh yeah.
If I was to isolate what interests me the most is like, I don't as much as I will verbalize that risk taking is important, I don't think I have the muscles to take risks like that. And they compound, right? So they take a couple risks and they pay off. And now there's no water brand on earth that is going to like compete with them because they haven't been in the gym. They don't have the muscles. They're not going to walk up and like do the same type of work. That's cool to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And for the haters who are like, oh, it's just water in a can. Well, yeah, but they've built this brand that through these types of calculated experiments that has caught the attention of the consumer, and kudos.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's got an angle. And I think they talk a lot about like, I have a soft spot for like skaters. I feel like skateboarding creates like so much culture, whether it's like the DIY part of like every kid who picks up skateboarding makes a skate video. And it feels like you're just as validated as like a big brand doing like a video that takes months and months and months to do. But I feel like when you hire a skateboarder, you know that they're going to pull their weight.
Yeah. And
they have a team that has like a lot of like history with skateboarding. I really like that.
Yeah. Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I had a blast.
So where can people find you and Platter?
Platter is platter.co, platter.co. You can find me on LinkedIn. I talk a lot on there. So if you want to hear me sound off on branding, marketing, AI, the future of the internet, whatever, follow me there.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So you guys can find us on Instagram at namedrop.pod, and I'm at Malbakes. Thanks so much.